I declare the ordinary council meeting of the 20th of February 2024 held in council chambers at level 2, 388 Hayes Street, Subiaco, open at 5:31 p.m. Welcome councillors, welcome staff, welcome members of the public gallery and the media. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I recognise their ongoing connection to this land. We'll take attendances now. We've got Councillor Burns missing in action. I don't think we've received an apology. All other councillors are present in person, and all members of the executive leadership team are present in person also, and we'll announce the additional staff members as and when needed. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures this evening? Okay, there were no public questions previously taken on notice, so we'll move into public question time. Jackie Greenshields from Salisbury Street, a question on C3.
Good afternoon, or evening nearly, councillors, staff and the Mayor. I've just had drops put in my eyes from an eye specialist, so if I stumble a bit, they're not clear yet, so we'll see how we go. Question 1, Municipal Gardens, opened in 1900 by Sir John Forrest. In respect of our city's heritage, the business plan continually uses the term development of the civic precinct and states that the net proceeds of the sale of the property of Rupert and Bagot will be used to fund the redevelopment of the civic precinct. The community for decades has referred to the area where the current council chambers and admin building are as municipal gardens, council gardens or Rankin Gardens. The current council chambers were built in the municipal gardens in 1968. Its previous location in 1909 was further north towards Bagot and Robert and demolished in 1971. The community is very concerned that the City of Subiaco is going to increase the footprint of the current building, encroaching upon the 124-year-old municipal gardens and changing the traditional garden layout to build a very large civic centre with funds raised from the sale of community properties. Can the City guarantee to the community that the current footprint of the council chambers / administration won't increase in size if it is rebuilt or encroach upon any of the open garden spaces in our 124-year-old municipal gardens?
Thank you. I'll just make a statement in relation to that question and the others on C3, because I think what I'm about to say is relevant to all the questions. I want to be clear that there's no intention to sell off assets to build a new palace for ourselves. Since we resolved to build a new civic building within the civic precinct over 12 months ago, councillors and I have been taking our time to work through the design considerations for that building in collaboration with our staff. We've been carefully considering community needs and interests. And the shared intent is clear. We appreciate the unique garden setting of the civic precinct, its magnificent trees, as well as the history and the potential future of the site. And there's a shared desire to be financially prudent while providing for a building that we can all be proud of that will stand the test of time. It's too early for me to comment on what exactly will be built because we simply do not know. But many of the discussions have reflected the sentiments in your question and the sentiments in the questions and the statements to come. And I understand, based on the progress that we've made in workshop settings so far, a report will be coming to council soon to consider the procurement of an architect to help us progress the design in a sensitive and thoughtful way, and we'll certainly be putting our initial thoughts to the community for consultation as part of that process. So with that general comment out of the way, Director Corporate Services, did you want to answer the first question, and then we'll move on to Ms. Greenshields' second question.
Sure. So just going back for context, so at its ordinary council meeting on 13th of December 2022, council resolved to demolish and rebuild 241 Rockyby Road, Subiaco. Since that time, several elected member workshops have been held to explore fundamental aspects of that project, and the resolution from that time requires council approval of the design brief and a project management plan prior to the the project proceeding further. The workshops have certainly considered a range of factors, including the history of the site, its context in its garden setting, as well as current and future community needs. Selection of an architect will be a key next step in progressing design considerations, which can then provide the basis for community consultation to ensure that the community has the opportunity to provide input.
Thank you. Ms Greenshields.
Question 2. The City of Subiaco currently operates 3 community centres, the Subiaco Community Centre, the Tom Dadle Centre and the Palms Community Centre, all of which are within walking distance, short distance of each other. Is the City intending to sell or demolish any of these community centres with the intent of trying to raise revenue and/or amalgamate their functions into one very large civic centre building in the middle of the historic municipal gardens? What is the plan for these community centres, as I don't believe the community want or need a huge civic centre? Thank you.
Director Corporate Services.
So I think we've spoken a bit about the civic centre. So separating out the question around the demolition and sale of community centres. So as per the agenda report C3 on tonight's agenda, there is a proposal before Council to demolish the Subiaco Community Centre, given that it's no longer fit for purpose and has reached the end of its useful life. And there are 2 other community centres within walking distance, as well as the Shenton Park Community Centre. Collectively, these other centres have capacities to support growth in community usage, and further investment will be required in coming years to support their amenity. The office's recommendation has taken into consideration community feedback that the property relating to the Subiaco Community Centre should be retained to provide for a community amenity, and also Council's decision to add the mature lemon-scented gum at 203 Bagot Road to the City's significant tree register. As such, the recommendation proposes that a pocket park be created on the site for the benefit of the community. The City has no other plans to sell or demolish its other community centres and continues to maintain and renew them for ongoing use.
We'll move on to public statements now. We've got a statement from Mark Tonti of Salisbury Street, Subiaco, a statement on C3.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to make some comments, and I note the Mayor's comments earlier tonight, which address a number of the issues that I've raised here, but I'll read it anyway. Dear Mayor and councillors, we ask the council to retain the 2 lots, both noted on map as lots 203 facing Bagot Road, for the purpose of community benefit, noting the real possibility of repurposing the entire area of these 2 lots as a pocket park. We also urge the council to retain lot 6 Rupert Street and lot 8 Rupert Street, again for the purpose of community benefit. The dwelling at 8 Rupert Street and the car park at the rear of 6 Rupert Street may well best serve the community as a neighbourhood community centre with car park, which is consistent with decentralisation of such uses as found in progressive councils. Currently, the Council has yet to finalise the design of the replacement administration building and council chamber. Community is unaware of the impact that this new development will have on the various heritage features located at Rankin Gardens on Rockaby Road, nor has the community been involved in determining the services that this building might provide. These are just some views. I'm sure there are plenty more. There is no urgency to finalise the future of the land in item C3 and the redevelopment of the council offices and chambers located in Rankin Gardens. Perhaps it's best for the council to workshop the further possibilities for the Bagot Road and Rupert Street land and the replacement administration building and council chamber. Surprises brought about by change without community on board, such as the introduction of the digital e-parking permit parking system, simply must be avoided. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tonti. I've just realised I'm not wearing my chains. Thanks for telling me. But we'll continue on. We'll go casual today. Jackie Greenshields of Salisbury Street, Subiaco, a statement on C3. That's all right.
Let's see if this works. Sorry, I'm just got to get my vision in tow here. Dear Mayor and Councillors, the land in question at Bagot Road and Rupert Street was originally chosen for a senior citizen centre as it was centrally located on a major bus route, bus stop, and walking distance to all civic and commercial facilities. The locational benefits of this land have not changed over the years, but our community needs have increased. The land and houses should not be sold. The city should retain all of the land and provide what is a growing trend and need across Australia for neighbourhood community houses, hubs/learning centres. Retaining 8 Rupert Street and the land at 6 provides a unique opportunity in a prime location to facilitate this. Across Australia, there is a greater need to move away from the haul for hire model and facilitate well-branded neighbourhood houses and hubs. We could call it Rupert House or Totterdale House, for providing regular term-by-term socially inclusive educational, recreational, health and wellbeing and social support opportunities for our local community. In Victoria, there are over 400 neighbourhood houses, but no 2 neighbourhood houses are ever the same. Guided by a community development approach, they each engage and respond to the needs and the priorities of the communities they serve. By retaining the land at 6 Rupert Street, along with the house, there are many more opportunities to utilise an expanded outdoor area for community activities. For an example, an outdoor space attached to the neighbourhood house would allow for social activities, mini fundraising stalls, art exhibitions, casual meeting place, coffee catch-ups, playgroups, meet your neighbours, garden workshops, etc. The house could also be utilised by our Subi Voice of Youth as a regular meeting place. If the R50 lot at 6 Rupert is sold, I fear that the council will have little planning control over what is built under delegated authority. A large R50 development could potentially overshadow the heritage listed house on the southern side boundary at 8 Rupert Street and possibly create a huge heat sink wall covered in air conditioners on the northern side or balconies of what may be a pocket park and affecting the amenity of the 2 single-storey neighbours on Bagot Road. In summary, neighbourhood houses create socially vital and unique experiences for people in urban environments where low threshold and affordable opportunities for social interaction are scant. I urge the council tonight to rethink how this house and land in Rupert Street could be best utilised. Please do not sell any of the land. It is not always about the money, but what this land can give back to the community. I'm confident the people of the city of Subiaco will come on board the journey if given the opportunity to participate in the land's future community uses.
Thank you. We also received a letter from Margaret Harris of Bagot Road, which I understand has been passed on to you, Ms Greenshields, and I'd be happy for that to be read out. Technically, it was received a little bit late to be a statement, but it was received within 35 minutes of the council being open for business this morning. So given that she lives next door, I think it's pretty reasonable that we hear what she had to say. So thank you.
My name is Margaret Harris and I have lived in 201 Bagot Road since 1965, nearly 60 years. I've lived here for long enough to remember when there was a woodyard at 203 Bagot Road, where the disused community centre is. I remember the community centre being built in 1967 and the later extension. I remember the lemon-scented gum when it was a sapling. It was planted after 1967, so it's not over 70 years old, has been quoted. When I read that our council was considering adding 203 Bagot Road to the existing pocket park, known as the Rupert Street Park, I and others living in the vicinity were delighted. Since the closure of the community centre, this area has fallen into disrepair and has been taken over by undesirable elements, and the little park is often littered with rubbish. I urge the Mayor and councillors to seriously consider demolishing the eyesore that is the abandoned community centre and putting some thought into creating a big park, a park big enough to meet our community needs, particularly with young families moving into Subiaco, gardens, some comfortable seating, perhaps a small playground and adequate lighting to keep the park safe by night and day. And some rubbish bins. More open space is needed in central Subiaco. Subiaco is in danger of losing its village identity. Certainly, it is vastly different from the Subiaco I arrived in 1965. It had to move forward and many improvements have been made, but indiscriminate high-rise and no proper planning for parks and gardens for an expanding population is not the best way forward. I attach a list of some 17 very near neighbours' signatures who also support my submission to Council. Thank you, councillors, for your attention. Margaret Harris, 201 Bagot Road, Subiaco. And I'll just hold up and it just says, we support wholeheartedly the attached submission by Margaret Harris to the Subiaco Council to demolish the disused community centre at 203 Bagot Road and convert the area into proper park. So it was just...
Thank you. We'll make sure we've got a copy of that if we don't already. Okay, that's the end of public statements, and there were no approved petitions or deputations for this evening. So, councillors, I will ask you to confirm minutes of a previous meeting, being the ordinary council meeting of the 12th of December 2023. Can I have a mover and a seconder for those minutes? Councillor Kosovich moving. Councillor Jones seconding. We'll be voting with buttons this evening, so I'll put that to the vote.
I did press.
Okay, the minutes are adopted unanimously. Right, announcements. This might take a little bit longer than normal, but it's a pretty pertinent issue at the moment. I'm going to provide an update on e-permits. So as a council, these last 2.5 years, we've overseen many things done very well by the City of Subiaco, and each year we've tried and succeeded, I'd say, to do a little better than the previous year. But let's talk about the e-permits rollout. E-permits encompass a number of different types of electronic parking permit. Some of these have been much anticipated and have made people's lives easier, but there's one type of e-permit that we know is causing some difficulty for people in our community. And I'm talking about visitors' e-permits specifically. To residents, ratepayers and the community, we say we have heard your feedback and your first impressions. And we have our own first-hand experience from using the system as well. Now, EasyPark, the technology provider behind our e-permits platform, has given the city some commitments. They'll be prioritising the resources necessary, and their executives will be meeting with the city staff every few days to work through reported issues and solutions. In the next week, EasyPark will release a round of changes, including the creation of a favourites list for repeat visitors, removing the need to enter the same vehicle registration details time and time again, an increase to the system timeout limit, giving people more time when creating or managing their permits, and improvements to how certain information is displayed to make it easier to read on all devices. Anyone who's ever used any piece of software knows that it's a process of constant updates, fixes and improvements. Is anyone still using Windows 95? Probably not. Together with EasyPark, the city will continue to work on a number of system enhancements. And look, not everything will be ready within the week, but they are coming. These include things like the removal of non-mandatory fields when creating an application and the creation of automated emails to confirm accepted permit applications. In short, the overall user experience with the platform will improve regardless of device, and this is a priority. The city will publish information about what is changing as it becomes available. But in the meantime, the e-permit system is a new system, so it's not perfect, and we're not too proud to admit that. But the system is functioning, and as I've said, we can expect improvements and upgrades. Now, we know there are some people who, no matter how good the e-permit system gets, would prefer to keep the old physical visitors' permits. Our message to you is please give the system a chance. It has been introduced as a means of improved parking management across the city. Proper parking management is how we ensure that there's a reasonable chance that your visitors will be able to find a parking spot in the first place. And digital done right can make our modern lives easier. Where would we be if we only sent letters instead of email, or we couldn't book an Uber? Or we couldn't do our shopping on eBay or Amazon? What if we couldn't stream Netflix or our council meetings for that matter? All this said, we recognise it's important that technology does not leave anyone behind. So if you are a person who does not have an electronic device connected to the internet, or if you just have difficulty using the system, please contact the city's compliance team as they are ready to help. And if your circumstances are preventing you from using e-pit permits, they will work through this with you. So that's the update on e-permits. And we don't just do e-permits in the city of Subiaco, there are other announcements as well. What I thought I'd mention just briefly is the Sustainability Sundowner event that the city's running tomorrow evening, a great initiative of the planning team. And I understand there's 150 people attending the event at Bob Hawke College, and the event's sold out. The idea of the event is to celebrate the release of the city's new local planning policy on sustainable development. And we're also going to take an opportunity to highlight some sustainability initiatives undertaken by the city in recent years and on the horizon. We're pitching this as the perfect opportunity to learn about our new local planning policy and how sustainability measures can be incorporated into upgrades, renovations and new builds across the city. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm sure the planning staff are too, and I note a number of councillors have signed up for that as well, so it should be a great evening. Okay, so that's the end of announcements. We'll move on to the reports. At the moment, we've got a possible on block vote on the basis that some of the reports aren't the subject of proposed amendments or alternatives. So the possible on block vote at the moment consists of C1, C4, C5 and C6. So let's propose that they would be passed on block unless someone wants to remove one of those items from the on block vote. So just confirm that C1, C4, C5 and C6. Okay, if no one wants to remove any of those items from the on block vote, we'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor De Vries and Councillor Kosovich. All those in favour of the on block vote? Great, so that's carried unanimously, meaning that items C1, C4, C5 and C6 have been carried without debate. Okay, so that leaves just two reports for consideration but before we go behind closed doors. That'd be C2 and C3. Right, so moving on to C2, the design review panel appointments for 2024 to 2026. We've got the officer recommendation to make a certain number of appointments, and we've got an amendment from Councillor O'Connor and an alternative from Councillor Johnston, but I'll start by looking for a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation, and if possible, I'll ask that the mover and the seconder propose some names for who it is that we will be appointing to the DRP. Councillor Kosovich, moving?
Yes, I am.
Do you have some proposed names?
Yes, I am.
What are they? Maybe if you just confirm which names you're proposing we appoint.
Okay, apologies. Dominic Snellgrove, Tony Blackwell, Philip Griffiths, Simon Ventura, Chris Marr, Brent Wood-Gush, and the recommended specialist person is Prasanna Surawira.
Was there a proposed chair as well?
Sorry, the chair is amongst the persons appointed, I believe. There's a 6.
Was that Dominic Snellgrove?
Snellgroves.
Okay.
Chair.
So that's what you're moving. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Jones. Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. The City of Subiaco Design Review Panel has played an integral role in improving the design quality of projects and applications since its inception in 2012. It is highly regarded and is seen as an industry benchmark, with the term of the current DRP expiring on 29 February 2024. Following a public nomination process, the Multidisciplinary Officer Selection Panel has recommended that 6 ordinary, including the chair, and 1 special member be appointed to the DRP for 2 years, that is 1 March 2024 to 28 February 2026. And accordingly, as per the officer report, I move Council appoint the following persons to the DRP. Do you want me to read those names again?
It's probably not necessary.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
The Design Review Panel plays an important role in the City's process for assessing development applications, providing invaluable advice to the City's planners in respect to the architectural and design merits of the proponents' plans. The City has a rigorous process for selecting suitable people to sit on the panel and aims to have a good mix of expertise in various fields, including architecture, public art, heritage, landscape architecture, sustainability and urban design. The selected nominees have achieved the highest scores under this process and will be appointed for a period of 2 years.
Thank you. Just so we've got some clarity on what we're debating, I think we'll test the amendment that's on the table at the moment. That's Councillor O'Connor's amendment. Presumably, Councillor, you will move your amendment, so I'll be looking for a seconder for that amendment. Councillor De Vries. Councillor De Vries seconding the amendment. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. Excuse me. Do I need to read my whole?
Well, you've submitted it ahead of time and the amendment's been published, so I think it's pretty clear what we're talking about, but maybe if there's someone watching the movie who, the meeting who hasn't done the pre-reading, then maybe just talk us through the gist of it.
I'll paraphrase then. My proposal, there are 2 parts to my proposed amendment. The first is to extend the term of the appointment of the Design Review Panel, the current proposed members whose names we've heard already, extending their term by 2 months to the 30th of April 2006, and that applies to the panel members, the chair, and the specialist appointment. My reason for that is that it will allow the recruitment process for future panels to begin after the main festive and holiday period, avoiding the time when applicants are likely to have other priorities or be on extended leave. The amendment is possible under LPP 7.1, clause 2.9, which allows council to extend the term of the appointment for up to 6 months. And it relieves pressure off applicants who may have many other things on during that very busy period. The second amendment that I propose relates to the dynamics of the planning system and the local government operating environment in Subiaco and Western Australia more generally. And it proposes that council reviews LPP 7.5 to ensure that it remains up to date and relevant. That's consistent with the advice of the WA Local Government Association, which says that planning policies should be regularly reviewed to make sure that they remain relevant and in line with sound town planning principles, and the age of an LPP reduces its relevance when making decisions. So it was last reviewed in 2020, so the amendment proposes a review after approximately 5 years, which seems to me an appropriate time for review. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor De Vries.
I think these fairly straightforward changes just make sense from a past perspective when we did change the community consultation period so that it didn't fall straight into a public holiday. So it's a similar kind of thinking. We did that, I think, back in 2019, if I recall, which was something that the community asked of us. And I can see in this context there's some commonality. I also know that we do regularly review our policies and that we may well have been doing this, but it's good that we put a focus on this because there may be things that we should be looking at. And as you know, things change over time, it's important that a new council has a new look at things, and that's coming up for review, I believe, next year. So these are both important and simple changes that I think can improve processes and perhaps improve some choices of candidates who may otherwise not have put their hand up for it. So not to say that the current candidates aren't fantastic, that's not the issue here, but it's just a nice way of embracing another opportunity. Thank you.
Any speakers against the amendment? I'll just ask a question while you're thinking about that. It's a question for Direct Development Services. In the absence of this amendment, what is the timetable or the process for reviewing our planning policies? Do we have diarised timeframes, or is it more of an ad hoc exercise?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. We recently have completed a review of all of our policies and I think the average time is anywhere from 2 to 3 years for the life of the length of our current policies. So this would in any event be considered for review. So the amendment would be consistent with what we would be planning to review the policy. And I think anywhere from that 2 to 5 year mark is really a key time, given that the planning system can change pretty quickly, and it's always a good time to stop and check and make sure you're still contemporary with current standards.
Good. Any speakers against the amendment? Anyone still wanting to speak for the amendment? Okay, I'll call the vote on the amendment. Okay, the amendment's carried unanimously. Now, I've been following the emails, but I'm not entirely sure where we landed, Councillor Johnston, on what you submitted as to whether it's an amendment or an alternative, and what exactly you were proposing. I've got in my notes that staff would consider it an alternative. Is that the latest governance advice, that it's an alternative? Okay, well, it all comes down to whether it negates the intent of the original recommendation or not. What you've proposed, Councillor Johnston, is to add an extra member to the DRP, as I understand it. Yeah, I'm not sure that negates, so I'm happy to treat it as an amendment, because otherwise we simply won't get to your alternative. So if you're still wanting to move it and you want to move it as an amendment, we can do that. And perhaps you could clarify if you've got a name in mind as well, or whether you're just proposing we expand the numbers and that's the intent.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I was wanting to add an additional member to the panel, so that we've got breadth of experience, particularly when panel members are on leave or have conflicts of interest, which does happen. And can I state who I'm recommending? Denise Morgan brings additional expertise in urban planning and strategic.
Okay, so I'll just cut you off for a second. So you're proposing that we increase the number of panel members by 1, and Denise Morgan would be the additional appointee?
Correct.
Okay, you'll have a chance to speak to that in a sec if we've got a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Burns, seconding. Okay, Councillor Johnston, if you want to speak to the amendment, that's great.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's to ensure that we've got breadth of experience and numbers on the panel when we have people, existing members that have conflicts of interest if they're applicants of a development, and Denise brings specific expertise in planning and would strengthen that expertise area on the panel.
Thank you. Councillor Burns, do you want to speak to the amendment? Oh, I'll take your first answer. Okay, if you want to speak, Councillor Burns, now's your chance. Does anyone else want to speak to the amendment? Councillor Kosovich?
Thanks, Mayor. Just a question. If we accepted this amendment, would that permanently increase the size of our DRP?
Director of Development Services?
Thank you. It would increase it for the next couple of years, but once we review our local planning policy, we can then decide on a new number of members.
Okay, I'll take any speakers against the amendment. Any speakers for? Right, I'll call the vote on the amendment. Oh boy. All right, the amendment's carried 8-1. Okay, so we're now debating the substantive motion as amended by Councillor O'Connor's amendment and as amended by Councillor Johnston's amendment. So we're now proposing a total of 6 DRP members. Two, I don't know what we call them. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we've now got a total of 7 panel members, including the chair and a specialist panel member as well. Any other speakers for or against what we've now got in front of us? Councillor Kosovich, do you want to close?
I think it's a fairly straightforward matter. I think the amended changes are going to sit well. I don't have any problems with any of those. And yes, I would again suggest that this is an important thing to get passed. It's been very well done. Yeah, that's about it. I would commend it to everyone.
Okay, I'll call the vote. All right, C2's carried unanimously, so we've got our DRP for the next couple of years. Thanks, councillors, for the work that went into those amendments as well. Okay, C3, the major land transaction affecting multiple lots. We've got the officer recommendation in respect of 203 Bagot Road, 6 Rupert Street and 8 Rupert Street. And we've also got an alternative submitted by Councillor De Vries. But just to confirm, as I've foreshadowed in the email correspondence this week, there's a number of questions bundled into the officer recommendation. So when it's time to vote, we'll break it down so that we're considering each property on its own when it comes time to vote. And I'm allowed to do that under the meeting procedures. So thank you, CEO. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation in C3? Councillor Kosovich moving. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones seconding. Councillor Kosovich.
Thank you, Mayor. I begin by thanking staff for their excellent work in compiling this officer report and the extensive inquiries they have responded to from elected members in this three-way land transaction, which at its heart has the creation of a pocket park on the no longer utilised Subiaco Community Centre at 203 Bagot Road, which incorporates part of 6 Rupert Street. This major land transaction includes 8 Rupert Street, the only residential property in the city's investment portfolio. This heritage-protected residence has been sitting idle for a number of years, and the maintenance and upkeep of all of these properties has become a financial burden to the community. The sale of 8 Rupert Street represents the means by which the city funds this proposal. Late last year, and despite this matter not being put to the community via the Have Your Say portal, the city received 8 submissions in relation to the business plan, which in the main requested the nominated properties to be retained for a community benefit. However, as we have seen over the past week, in written submissions to the city, together with the many residents and ratepayers I have personally spoken to, there is now overwhelming support for demolishing the community centre in favour of retaining the community benefit through the establishment of a pocket park. To that end, I am seeking the retention of 6 Rupert Street, as it affords the city the unique opportunity to absorb this land into the pocket park, thereby expanding it from a mere 606 square metres to a more meaningful and readily usable 1,000 square metres. By way of comparison, Richard Diggins Park sits on 900 square metres of land, all of which is totally utilised by the community, including families, people with special needs, the young, the old, and those in need of a place to walk their dog. A similar sized park to Richard Diggins Park will more effectively address our community's requirements in terms of having sufficient recreational amenity for families, which among other things will include children's play equipment, sustainable bench seats and tables, a water fountain and a barbecue. It will enhance the city's tree canopy, making it habitable year-round by ensuring there are sufficient cooler shaded areas in the park in our rapidly heating climate. The park will also make a significant contribution to open green space in this densely packed part of the city, directly opposite the future medium to high density Crossways Coles local development plan site. I conclude by saying this is a once in a generation opportunity where council can directly have a say in the gaping issue of insufficient green space for our future requirements, thereby going some way towards meeting the needs of our rapidly growing community. And finally, it will put to rest any underlying concerns about the future retention of the large lemon-scented gum tree overhanging the community centre that was made subject of the significant tree register by our previous Subiaco Council. I commend the officer recommendation to you.
Thanks, Councillor. I should just clarify that when it's time to vote, we'll be breaking the recommendation down into separate questions, but for the time being, I've asked for a mover and a seconder for the whole recommendation, and I think that's what you've done, Councillor Kosovic. You've moved the whole recommendation, although I suspect when it's time to vote, there may be some divergence on how you approach the recommendation.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes, what's the point of order, Councillor?
Did Councillor Kosovic just say that he would like 6 Rupert Street not included in the sale, because that then is not in accord with the officer recommendation? In fact, as I was advised by staff, that would be an alternative.
I don't know exactly what Councillor Kosovic said, but yeah, okay, people are nodding. Perhaps that's what he said, but what he's done is move the officer recommendation, but speak to a slightly different point of view. And it wouldn't be the first time that's happened in these chambers. I've seen people previously move officer recommendations and speak for something else. It can be done.
But it is, again, well, perhaps Councillor Kosovich might like to make a comment.
Well, I mean, I don't really know what you're asking. You want Councillor Kosovich to make a comment on what he's just said?
No, I'm inquiring there how I could be advised that was an alternative, and
Okay, well, Councillor Kosovich can't clarify that for you. If you want governance advice, I'll ask the CEO, I suppose.
So if I could, through the chair, the reason it would be an alternate would be as it's currently described. The Mayor, under section 6.5 of the Meeting Procedures Local Law, has identified that in accordance with that, the presiding member can break down complex questions, and given there's a number of complex questions within the officer recommendation, it might be helpful if we actually show that now as to what the vote as to breaking that down would look like, and that may assist. And so therefore, if in the past the presiding member wasn't to break this down into the complex questions in a separate motions of, as you can see, motion 1, motion 2, 3A and now 3B, having broken that down, and you would be able to vote on that separately. What the Mayor asked for was a mover and a seconder for the whole lot. Doesn't necessarily mean that the mover or the seconder would vote for each portion of that. So that's my explanation.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing we've heard from the community is that they do have a very protective attitude towards community facilities. They're not keen on losing them, and they're suspicious of promises to replace a facility with another one somewhere else sometime in the future. So I think it's important that when we're considering the future of community facilities, we bear that in mind. A pocket park is still a community facility, so what we're proposing here isn't losing a community facility, it's replacing a rundown one with a brand new one, which would be the pocket park. The community centre at the moment covers 3 lots, including 6 Rupert Street, and I think that there's community expectation that the pocket park would be replacing all of that community centre. So I think 6 Rupert Street should be considered as part of that community centre and therefore part of the pocket park going forward. As has been pointed out by some people, if we do sell 6, then we have no control over what would be placed there, and this could adversely affect the pocket park and the neighbourhood in general. I think we should maintain control of this going forward. In respect of 8 Rupert Street, that's a standalone block which is capable of being sold as is. It's zoned residential and is suitable for a dwelling, and more homes in Subiaco is good. We have a housing crisis at the moment, so this may be small, but it is adding to the housing stock. It's heritage listed, so it's going to remain substantially unchanged, even if work is done on it. And it's not really suitable for many not-for-profit organisations. There are better alternatives out there. It would be prohibitively expensive to upgrade it, and there's little prospect of finding a tenant if we don't. So by selling it, we can use the proceeds, which would be more than sufficient to pay for the funding of the pocket park. We can make the decision to demolish and build the pocket park today. That doesn't necessarily mean that the demolition has to take place immediately. We can subsequently have workshops to define the design of the pocket park. So we're not going to be necessarily going to be left with an eyesore while we work through those processes. And we're perfectly capable of making the decision on 8 Rupert Street today without affecting the others. So I commend this motion.
Okay, I'll take speakers for or against now, because I suspect there's probably going to be a bit of discussion on each of the complex questions that we're going to be voting on in due course. So speakers for or against.
Point of order, Mayor. I'm going to move a procedural motion, if I may. And,
Well, okay, it's not a point of order, it's a procedural motion.
it's a procedural motion.
Yep.
Under 7.1A, that we move to the next item of business, please.
Okay, do we have a seconder for the procedural motion? Councillor Johnston seconding. Councillor Power, do you want to speak to the procedural motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, I think we have just had an example of why we need to take this to a workshop and consider it. We have a recommendation before us for the sale of 2 properties, and the 2 speakers who've so far spoken have said, but that's not what they want. I think we need to bring this back to a workshop. Look, just to allay any fears, I am in support of a pocket park. In fact, I think it's a great idea, but we might be able to make it even better by bringing it to a council workshop. So, look, the backstory is that when this first came to council for advertising, it was a major land transaction. The sale of 203 Bagot Road with 2 lots and the sales of 6 and 8 Rupert Street. A big land transaction which, according to the views of a number of residents, should not go ahead, with the sort of argument that once the land is sold, it's gone for good. Now, I reckon as a major land transaction that might have faced some difficulty at this council. So look, I was really quite surprised when the staff recommendation came back in part with a proposal for a pocket park in response to those ratepayer submissions. Look, we're venturing, I think, into a new and untested area. Usually parks are Crown land specified for that purpose and that use alone. But this is something completely different. These allotments are freehold council land, income-producing land, that the administration is recommending be turned into a park for community benefit. For me, that's almost like a breathtaking opportunity, and I thank staff for raising it. But it's opened the eyes of the imagination. Look, we can dream what might be. So why am I moving this procedural motion at this time on the debate? Well, I'm aware Councillor De Vries has submitted an alternative which would achieve the same thing, a workshop, and I thank her for it. But if we continue going with this motion in bite-sized pieces, we're starting to scramble the egg, and they're very difficult to unscramble. At the moment, we have a clean palette. We've dispensed with the original major land transaction plan. So now we can take a look what could be without the encumbrances of decisions made tonight, a fresh, unconstrained assessment at a council workshop. Personally, I would also like to see number 6 Rupert Street retained, as my 2 fellow councillors have said, and as members of the community have said. But that's not what this motion says. That's the problem. That's why it needs to come back to a council workshop. Personally, I'd like to see that 6 Rupert Street become part of the park, and so that we can have a park that ran between Rupert Street and Salisbury Street, you know, 2 of our most attractive streets. It'll be bookended by a park. I think that'd be a fantastic outcome. Look, it's up to us. We can dream, you know, of what could be in terms of community benefit. You know, green belt, wildlife corridors. Look, the palette is open to us. All of this would come at a cost to the city's bottom line, and that's why I think we need to step back and consider, and in particular frame it in terms of intergenerational equity that this opportunity provides to make the dream a reality. So look, I'd seek your support for this procedural motion to bring it back to a council workshop to make sure we get it right. Thank you.
Unfortunately, the thing about a procedural motion is that we don't debate them, so we've heard what Councillor Powell thinks, and now we'll vote on the procedural motion. It's not going to matter. Okay, the procedural motion's carried. 6-3. Yeah, just... Okay, well, councillors, I was just looking for my agenda, but in any case, that would have brought us to elected members' motions of which previous notice has been given, but there aren't any. As far as I'm aware, there's no business of an urgent nature that needs to be raised this evening. So I'll therefore look for a procedural motion to go behind closed doors so we can consider the final item of the evening, and it's a confidential leasing matter at item 13.2. So it's a procedural motion under 7.1H that the meeting be closed to the public to deal with the contract entered into, or which may be entered into by the local government. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the procedural motion? Councillor Kosovich moving, Councillor Johnston seconding. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've called the vote. I don't know if I said that out loud. Okay, no, I actually don't think I said it. The procedural motion's carried unanimously, so we'll go behind closed doors. Thank you, public. Thank you, media. Okay, now we're back online. I can confirm that behind closed doors, Council has resolved as follows. On 13.1, the area of Lords Recreation Centre highlighted on the plan attached to this report is leased to Peak Trampoline Incorporated, consistent with the terms contained in this report and otherwise on terms acceptable to the city. And the Chief Executive Officer is authorised to execute any documents, deeds and agreements necessary to give effect to this resolution. That brings us to the end of the meeting. There's no more business at tonight's meeting, so I'll declare the Ordinary Council meeting closed at 6:39 p.m. Thank you, councillors, for your contributions, and thank you, staff.